You're listening to the Water Prairie Chronicles podcast, where we share stories from individuals and organizations to help those parenting and living in the special needs community get connected and to help educate others about living with a disability. We welcome all who want to hear the stories we share here.
In this episode, Tonya continues her conversation with our son Christopher. He tells about being misunderstood by teachers and others because of the invisible disabilities he lives with.
I hope you enjoyed this part of my interview with Christopher. We'll pick up now where we left off last week in episode 4. So we've talked about being a sibling of someone with a disability, but for you personally, by the time you were in those early to middle elementary years, you were starting to show some struggles of your own. Can you tell us what some of the challenges are that you've had through the elementary years?
Through the elementary years, I had a lot of trouble writing, and I've never been good at reading, but reading wasn't the hard part. I was just as bad as all my classmates, but I could pronounce things, so I was fine. But I couldn't write to save my life, and spelling, even now, spelling was hard. I'd flip-flop my D's and my B's, and even now I have to double check to make sure they're right. Just in general, I couldn't write very well. My handwriting's still as awful as it used to be, but now I've picked up things that I wrote in first grade, and I'm reading it. I'm like, how did I ever understand what I was writing? Which I still find myself now as a sophomore in college reading things that I wrote last week and trying to figure out through the hieroglyphics what I wrote. So I didn't have good handwriting, and I couldn't spell very well. And I had this habit of, instead of starting a new sentence, I just continue and curve it down the side of the page. So imagine a right angle of, I get to the end of the paper and I just go down with it. So I didn't think to write underneath there's a new sentence. So
Do you I know you know this, but what's the name of that condition that you have and that was showing up back then?
The writing thing?
Yes.
It's called dysgraphia.
Yeah.
Which is the lesser known, less popular version of dyslexia. So nobody knows what it is, really. If you tell anybody, they've never heard of it before.
Well, now some of our listeners are special education teachers and resource teachers. Mm-hmm. They will know what you're talking about.
Correction, 50% of them will know what we're talking about. The other half doesn't. But they're going to tell us that they do. But yeah, so I always tell people in the most easy, simple way, dysgraphia is dyslexia, but it's for writing. So it's characterized by poor motor function, so bad handwriting, and not able to spell what you're reading. So if you wrote something out and you wanted me to copy it down, it's harder for people with dysgraphia to write the same letters and all. So if you show me how to spell the word little, I guarantee you I'm going to find a way to mess that up. Whenever I was younger, I'd put one T, or I'd put 2 T's and 2 L's. I know it has 2 L's, but I'd put 2 L's after the 2 T's. It makes jotting down notes that much harder. Just writing in general and having good handwriting, all kids have bad handwriting. There's a few out there that were just blessed, and most of them are these little girls that just have phenomenal handwriting by 6th grade, and I don't know how it happens. I'm very jealous, but a lot of times you can tell that there's an issue whenever, I hold the pencil very weird, or very unconventional, so I had to put this little rubber gripping thing that showed me where to put my fingers to write. And it is the most uncomfortable thing ever, because that's just not how it should be in my mind. So I just went back and I hold a pencil in like like this hybrid way between the way it should be held and the way that I hold it. So it's kind of different, but my handwriting, you can tell even when I'm trying, like it's just not up to par. So
Now, when you were in first grade, you were not reading when the other kids in your class were reading, because I knew that even though you hadn't figured out the reading yet, it wasn't because you weren't going to be able to. It was just there was something else going on, and you learned how to read by the end of first grade. But you would read aloud with me at night, and I could hear you reversing a lot of the words and a lot of the letters. And
oh yeah, I'd
so,
read. What was it? What was what was the name of it? Was a boy and a girl. It was like Dick and Jane. Was that the?
well, with Dick and Jane we had, and for our listeners, the part that was really difficult for me as the parent here was I have two children that are 22 months apart. Emily, being the first child, was reading when she was 3 years old and writing
She,
paragraphs when
she
she was four.
to summarize it, she is physically disabled. I am mentally
No, no, that isn't how you describe it. But the comparison here of the two, you can't compare two children with each other. Everyone's going to develop on their own timetable.
hmm
And so for Emily, she had more difficulty with the gross motor skills and getting out there and doing things because she needed her vision to be able to keep up with the other kids doing that. So she was really focused with what was in front of her. So reading came early for her because she could sit there and concentrate on it. For you, gross motor skills took off early, so you could run with the best of them, climb, do all those things. But reading was harder for you, and part of it was getting jumbled in there for you. And so when we questioned the school about it, they said that your aptitude was there, you were keeping up with everyone, and it looked like it was dyslexia, so there were no resources for you to be able to plug into. And we just
Mm.
had to wait to give it time. So second grade, you had a great teacher that year to start out with, but they had spelling tests, and you'd have to
This
take the spelling
class.
test. And every week, your list of words was like words like dad, D-A-D. You had to learn to spell that one because you were spelling it B-A-B. So it was still confusing. It was still looking like it was dyslexia. Well, during
Oh,
second grade, we tried to have them test you, and again, they came back and said you were keeping up with the work. It looks like dyslexia. We can't do anything about it. So it wasn't until third grade that we could get some type of help for you. And by then, you were reading, but like you were saying, your writing was falling
mhm.
further and further behind all your friends, and your anxiety level was going sky high at that point. And so we ended up having to go for private testing because every time we'd ask, we were told by the school system that you weren't far enough behind your peers to be able for them to have a formal IEP
Yeah,
meeting for you.
it was borderline abuse, but it was definitely bullying of just making fun of me in front of other teachers and all my classmates because my writing wasn't up to par. So he'd make us like write like full like what is it? What are the notebooks called? It's like college rule or whatever. So we'd write like 2 pages, not front and back, just like front, like 2.5, 3 pages worth of notes. And he'd come over, and because mine looked a certain way, or the handwriting wasn't neat enough, whatever that means, he would literally tear it up and tell me to start over. And like that's awful, first of all. But he would take me out into the hallway and like make me cry, and then have other teachers come up and make fun of me and calling me like a wuss for crying in front of these other teachers, just at like the worst. So, and he wasn't even my writing teacher. My writing
No,
teacher was on his side though, so it wasn't a good year at all. They both didn't like me.
yeah,
Um,
emotionally it was a hard year for you, and it was hard for
yeah,
me as well because of that.
I was a soft kid, so
Well, but you were a good kid though. You wanted to do the right thing.
I had a good heart. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was a soft kid though.
So for those listening to the story, this is the same year that he was hugging his sister and giving her a kiss after walking her to a room, and then this is where he would walk down to from there. So it was a frustrating year to try to
Mhm.
figure this out. And there were a lot of days that you would have to sit out during recess.
Oh yeah. So my teacher didn't like me so much that he took away everything I loved. And so I don't even remember what I did to deserve this, but he would not like me so much that he'd make me sit in a concrete square at recess. He would make me sit inside of one of those, and I couldn't leave the square or whatever, and I couldn't have any toy. I couldn't have a book to write in. I couldn't do nothing. At one point, I played with rocks, and he made me to throw the rocks away. Like, and that was my recess for all of 20, 30 minutes. So I had to sit there and be quiet and do nothing. On beautiful days, because when you're a kid, every day is beautiful. Um, somehow the weather gets bad whenever you get older, but um, like, and his justification was always like, you could walk in a circle in the square, you could do push-ups in a square, you could do sit-ups in a square, and that's your physical exercise. But he chose. I remember we had a meeting, and he was like, and he chose just to sit there. I'm like, I'm a kid. I want to run around, not be in a
Yeah.
confined square.
The
So,
the reason that we were told that you were sitting in the square is because you weren't finishing your work. So
hmm
so it's so and this is a piece that I wanted you to share, that because it shows the frustration that some of our kids have when they're in those early years of diagnoses with learning disabilities,
hmm
that there's a lot of misunderstanding that can happen. And in this case, it was clearly misunderstanding was happening. We had the diagnosis by then. We knew that you had dysgraphia. There was a reason that you weren't able to
oh, he
copy.
didn't. He didn't want to follow my IEP in the slightest.
Well, and that's the
I
other
was
piece
supposed to.
too.
I was supposed to get a copy of notes, and he would refuse to give me a copy of notes. He didn't. He would do everything so he didn't have to give me a copy of notes. He wouldn't give me like extra time on things. Like he was. I'm more important. And as a third grade teacher, you can't be like that.
Now,
So.
to be fair, you followed third grade with a fourth grade teacher that was one of the best teachers
Oh yeah, Mr.
in the
Boynton.
school. The reason I wanted to point this out, even though I hate to say anything negative about a school, you were in good schools all through the years. This actually
Mm,
was a good school. We were very involved as a family, but it was an unfortunate year during the time that we were finally getting a diagnosis, finally got you on an IEP,
mm,
and it was our first year of really having to fight to get teachers to follow the IEP
yeah.
and to make
It,
sure that
it
it
was the
was,
it was the first year of many years of being very misunderstood.
yeah,
So I think you can agree on that with me.
absolutely. And it
So.
caused a lot of anxiety in you as a young boy to be treated like this each day.
Mm,
And so fortunately we were able to find a great karate school that took you in and really worked with you one on one and helped rebuild some of your confidence during that time. But you would
mm.
still have emotional breakdowns even during that time just because of the
I
stress at school.
I was a soft kid, like I'll say. So
Well,
I was an emotional kid.
yeah, I mean, and it was a strength that you had, but at
Hmm
that point you had gotten beaten up enough emotionally that you can only take so much.
hmm
And so as your parent, Daddy and I had to really figure out how are we going to help you get through this part. And it was tough. I mean, parents that are listening, you're going through a lot of these same struggles, that you see your child struggling and hurting, and it's hard sometimes to know how to help them the best. And in this case, we have another child who also needs our focus, so we're balancing between the two and not wanting to leave either one of them drowning on their own. So it was a lot of just questioning, where do we go next? How do we do this? What do you need? We didn't want to provide so much help for you that you ended up getting weaker because you weren't doing anything on your own and learning the skills that you needed to learn. And we were starting to question at this point whether there's something else going on or not. And so it looked like it was anxiety, and that's how we were kind of following it. but you met with a counselor during that time, but really didn't feel like that was what you needed, so we didn't pursue that. And sports were a good relief for you at that point,
Mhm.
where you were pretty much in every sport that was out there. So let's regroup a little bit here. So because a lot of our listeners are parents of children with disabilities, and specifically for this episode, some of them are going to have kids who have dysgraphia or dyslexia. And at this point, we were still questioning whether it could be ADHD too. So, some of the things you've talked about how you felt as a child, do you think that any of these things prevented friendships for you as a child?
No, because I didn't, as a kid, I didn't like, so like being smart is like cool when you're a kid, and then eventually like you don't care anymore. Like, that's middle school where like being smart isn't the coolest thing anymore. But as a kid, like I wanted to be the smartest one in the class, and like even now, I always want to be the smartest one in the class. But honestly, like I really focused on just like friends more than anything, because like everybody that like I was friends with, we all struggled at school in our own ways,
Mm-hmm.
and like I always thought I was smart because I could do math,
And
and
you
like
were you by fourth grade you tested into the gifted program.
yes,
So
I could always do math pretty well, and like nobody ever really cared about like reading because nobody could read. So 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 like I was always just being a good friend. Like that's all anybody really cared about when you're a little kid is like who are your friends, like what are we gonna do, are we gonna play basketball today, stuff like that. Like
right,
that's all we ever really cared about is just being playing sports at recess, and like the talking in art class or whatever, like PE, like we never really like had issues with like friendship and all, like because we're kids. Kids don't see people for their differences. They see kids of like, I like this, do you like this, okay, we're best friends now. So
when you were, I mean, pretty much all your life you've always been like this, but even as a toddler and well into elementary and middle school, if we were somewhere at a park or something like that, you and Emily both, I mean, within minutes you had a
mm-hmm.
group of kids around you, and you were right in the throes of it. It never seemed there never seemed to be a reason for you not to make friends somewhere. And
No.
so it's and I see that with you today too. You're going to find some common ground with people as you meet them.
Mm-hmm. I'm a people person, so like I can find people and find something to talk about, like no matter what, because in college everybody's like quiet, they don't want to talk, or like if you don't know people, you don't want to talk to them.
Yeah.
Just, hey, we're both socially awkward right now, you want to talk about that, like that's pretty much how I approach things, is like we both don't know anybody here to talk to, like that's common ground, let's talk.
Right, there you
So
go. So for elementary and even middle school, do you have any tips for parents who have children with we'll include ADHD in here too, because anxiety and ADHD go together so well, and dysgraphia and dyslexia. So
read Dick and Jane.
say that again.
Read Dick and Jane.
Read Dick and Jane.
um um Fine for writing and like spelling words and all, eventually they'll spell the same word enough to where they'll figure it out if they learn how to spell it the right way. Eventually you just write it enough to where you don't have to think about it. But one thing, for because a very common thing with dysgraphia is B's and D's. The best trick that I was told by yours truly on the other side of this camera, my mother, the Tonya Wallum, is that lowercase b's are the same as uppercase b's, but without the top circle. So they face the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And d's are the opposite of b's. So a capital D is this way, but a lowercase d is the opposite of a b. So, and where you spell, I'm sure they still teach kids this way. Whenever you spell bed, it makes a bed.
Yep.
So that's kind of an easy way to remember it. For writing and all, like honestly, writing physically, not spelling, anything like that. Eventually spelling's going to work itself out. Like don't push a kid to do so many like spelling books and all that to like think like, oh, they'll spell it the same way every time, they'll figure it out, because if the kid doesn't want to do that, like they're not going to, it's not going to click. So make sure that they are doing it enough, but don't overly pressure it to them, because it kids work one way. It's in one ear and it's out the other unless it holds their attention. But but for like for writing and all, make sure they, if they're holding the pencil correct, because motor, obviously I didn't know how to hold a pencil, and motor skills are weird that way. They make these little rubber things that you put on pencils that like have like a thumb, like it shows you where to put your fingers to hold it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty beneficial. And just make your kids write, because honestly those muscles in your hand are never gonna get, it's not like cardio where you can run a mile and work your way up to a marathon. It doesn't work that way. But if your kids get enough writing where they are used to using those muscles, then eventually you are able to write more. But for me personally, it never got better for those muscle groups,
Do you remember
and
what I did for you in the kitchen?
not at all.
We took white paper and put it behind the sliding glass door,
Mm-hmm.
and I gave you or
Oh,
dry
so I
erase
wrote
markers.
expo markers on it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And had you write on that. And there were some assignments that we had you write on that, took a picture of it, and sent that to your teacher for your assignment,
Mm-hmm.
just to make it less stressful after whenever you had a lot of writing to do.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, there's cool ways to go about writing to keep people's attention and all, and like you could honestly like, for I'm talking specifically just about motor functional muscles in the hand and how tired your hand gets.
mm-hmm.
Even coloring books like that helps. That helps the motor functions and all. Reading and all. Find something that they want to read. I read a bunch of kids Scooby Doo books because that was
Yep.
interesting to me. I still have them on my shelf. That's what made me remember is I saw them on the shelf whenever I
You
went
also
home
got
last week.
into graphic novels.
Oh yeah, comic books are awesome. Because there's, as a visual learner, like I like to see things. I don't like to read things, but I like to see things, and I like to like do things hands on. Um, Pictures are good because then you can learn a story without the words and still be
Mm-hmm.
reading and all. So it kind of gets your stamina for reading up, but it also holds your attention, because if you're reading Pride and Prejudice as a first grader, you're hating your life, honestly. But if you're reading Batman comic books, like you're living life at that point. Garfield comic books were my favorite.
Yep.
Like they're pretty good. Was it Tobbs? What was his name? Henry and Tobbs? The tiger and
Calvin
the
and
little kid.
Hobbes.
Calvin and Hobbes. I was
Yep.
close enough. I
Yep.
was close enough.
All right.
Um,
So I'm going to catch you off there because I know we've been talking a lot, and you're trying to get your laundry done while we're working here.
yeah, we got like
So
5 minutes.
for kids who are in elementary school and maybe feeling beaten down a little bit by teachers that misunderstand them,
Hmm.
or by kids who might think that they're a little bit awkward and different, any advice to give those kids?
Um, you're gonna be okay. I somehow came out all right, and I'm on top of the world. Pressure makes diamonds. Um, Honestly, like in the moment, it's pretty. In the moment, you probably don't like it, but find something that you really enjoy and you love, and pursue doing that. Some people say that it's ADHD and you just follow the serotonin. I've been told that, where like your brain automatically goes, I want to do this instead of that, because one gives you that feel good feeling. But like honestly, sports was what I focused all my time into, because that's what I really enjoyed doing. And just have fun and enjoy yourself. And if people are giving you a hard time, find 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 a reason or a way or somebody to help you out there, and don't stress it too much, because they either are being hard on you because they want you to fulfill what they believe is your potential, or they could just be a crummy person and somebody else can help you figure out how to bridge that gap of misunderstanding. And like, nobody out there is ever going to know and understand who you are ever, because they don't know your life story. So if you can just be okay with who you are and be comfortable in your own skin and know that at the end of the day you're okay, you are always going to come out on top. And there are always going to be good things ahead, as long as you are always trying to find those good things.
Nice. I
So
like that.
just
All right, so to close out your younger years, by seventh grade, we did get a final diagnosis that you did have ADHD. It was
mm-hmm.
just being masked by the anxiety that was coming from the
Yeah.
stress earlier. So they are similar in some ways. So if you're in that questionable time, what we were told is that the approach would be very similar in how we would deal with it.
Yeah.
So you were getting some help by then. But
It's just simplify things. So find what works for you. For me, I like to take things that are very complicated and find the most simple way to look at it. And that helps with both anxiety and ADHD, because if you have a lot of work to do, then you get overwhelmed, and it's much easier to pick up your video games because that makes you happy than it is to do homework. So if you just find a way to be like, break it down, like I got 5 assignments, each assignment takes me an hour, but I can do one now. If I do one now and then I take a break while I'm eating and then do one after that, then that's 3 hours. I have 2 assignments done. And you can kind of break it down to wrap your head around it, of like how to get things done. And for me, that creates less stress, and that also makes my brain not go like, I hate this is the worst thing ever, like this is miserable. And like, it helps me not get overwhelmed as much, even though I really do get overwhelmed on a lot of stuff. So
So by the time you got to high school, you
mm-hmm.
had in middle school there were more misunderstandings happening that were similar to that third grade year,
Mm-hmm.
and
Well, I
it was
just couldn't
more.
sit still, and people didn't like that I couldn't sit still.
Yeah, and but
So
when we would, as parents, and whenever we would ask, well, what was happening, I'm thinking seventh grade especially, what was
mm-hmm.
happening, I would always be told that you were very polite, you were very respectful, but you would sharpen your pencil at the wrong time, you'd throw away a piece of paper at the wrong time. There was water turned on in the science lab, so you jumped up and turned it off without asking permission. What you had explained was there was a computer near there, so you were concerned about the computer
Mm-hmm.
getting damaged.
Yeah, one of my
And
one of my friends jokingly like turned on the eye cleaning water, whatever, and I jumped up to turn it off, and that's when the teacher walked in, and then now I get in trouble.
so you were, yeah. So that I've heard ADHD being explained as quick brained before, or fast brained, and I think that's what was happening was you're seeing the
Yeah.
need and jumping quick
Mm-hmm.
before anybody else saw there
Well,
was
I
even something
process
happening.
things very. If it's something that I'm trying to process, but not like overly thinking about it, like certain things just come to me quick. Like I don't have to think about it. My brain just like instantly goes, okay, do this. And before I even think about that, I've already done it.
Would you
So
consider that a superpower?
yes,
I think it is. I think it's a benefit in a lot of
because
different areas.
ADHD is hyper focus. So if you can find something that tickles your fancy or whatever, like something that makes you very interested in it, like that creates this it's very bad for time management, because like you get very tunnel vision. But if you're focusing on something, like nothing can break that focus. Like that's the only thing you want to think about. You're thinking about all the possible outcomes, opportunities, things that can happen. And you're very, especially for baseball, for me, I'm very quick twitch brain, so I don't have to think about much, I just do it. So in a sport that doesn't have much time for reaction, it's good. That benefits me.
All right. So once we got through the middle school years, you got into high school. We had to do a little bit of education for some of your teachers to help them allow for some modifications and accommodations on your IEP. But you were in a math class where you were standing up and taking tests and scribbling on your paper. And so some questions were starting to come up.
What grade was it?
10th grade. So you went part time. We decided to exercise some school choice, and we sent you part day to a school that worked with kids
The
who
Hill
were
Center.
college bound but had learning differences
Yeah.
for part of the day, and then you were in your regular high school for the rest of the day so that you were still eligible to play baseball with the school. And while you were at, now the school was the Hill Center that we sent you to, and for
Mm-hmm.
parents that are in this area, I can give you the link there, so that if you want to look into that for your child, it was a good resource. Very small class sizes. They could work specifically with the child who with the accommodations that they need for their learning difficulties. But while you were there, they started questioning whether you might have narcolepsy or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so, do you want to talk about those early symptoms of, or actually, before we get into that, how could you best explain what narcolepsy is?
From a technical standpoint, or just the way I explain it.
The way you would explain it to someone.
So I always tell people that narcolepsy is an autoimmune disease where the part of your brain that regulates when you should be asleep and when you should be awake slowly eats itself between the ages of 15 and 25. Um, but so your body naturally has like a time clock for when you should be awake and when you should be asleep. I know this because there's ads on TV for blind people that like helps regulate that because they can't see if it's daylight or not apparently. But um, so like your body doesn't naturally regulate if you have enough sleep or not, and like the stages of sleep and REM, and like I'm not going to get into that because that's very technical. But narcolepsy is basically um, it's basically like whenever you should be awake, your body wants to sleep. Whenever you should be asleep, your body wants to be awake. And if you sleep too much, you're very sleepy the entire day. If you sleep too little, you're very sleepy throughout the entire day. So it's basically your body at all times telling you like you should be asleep right now. So it's not fun because like I have in my experience, it's very hard to have energy to do anything at all times. So like you're it's like the way they explain depression in like novels where like you just want to be in bed all day, you don't want to do anything. It's the opposite for me because I want to be awake and I want to be alert, but I just can't be. Even if I have caffeine, even if like I just can't be awake and alert. And some days I just wake up and it's already 5 in the afternoon, and now I've just missed out on an entire day. So it's very it's very it's a very complex disability that I don't know that it's looked at fully as a disability, but it can be very debilitating on people's lives because we all have to function and be apparently I've been apparently told this in the last year that we all eventually have to be contributing members of society. Didn't know that was a thing, but it's hard to do that whenever you can't wake up on your own, whenever you're at all times there's a part of narcolepsy which I don't have. It's called cataplexy, which 70% of people with narcolepsy have cataplexy. So I'm part of the 30% that doesn't. But cataplexy is, in simple terms, strong pulls of emotion will make you fall asleep. So you could be laughing with friends, and it's one of those like deep, like actual laughs where you're not faking it, and just instantly pass out. But like you could be really happy, or you could be laughing, or you could be really excited, and just knock out and just fall over. I don't know because I don't have it, but you could fall over, I guess. But for me, like I get if I get comfortable in the slightest, like if a car is like nice and warm and I'm not driving, oh, I don't even have control. I'm just asleep. So before, whenever I was younger in high school, because eventually you were going to ask me, like, how did that eventually show up?
Yeah.
When I was in high school, I had this power to fall asleep standing up, and I didn't know that I had it because to me, I was awake and then I was awake again,
Yep.
and I just time traveled 30 minutes into the future.
Well, that's what I was talking about.
Um,
You were standing up taking a test, and your hand
oh yeah,
continued writing
Oh
with it.
yeah, I could write with my eyes closed. Like I got so good that I could like unlock my phone and do things while I had my eyes closed. And I didn't know how that happened, but apparently I've been practicing. Um, and like I'll wake up some mornings and like I'll have apps open on my phone that I haven't opened in months. And apparently I've been playing video games on my phone while I've been asleep. But
Have you ever texted anyone in your sleep?
yes, not like any anything on purpose or anything that makes sense, just like random, like I'll type words and then a bunch of gibberish like a cat walking on a keyboard, but I've never pressed send,
Oh,
thankfully.
good.
But I'll wake up and the text is there, and it's always like VFWPQRLZ, like a bunch of letters, but it always starts with like V. So either autocorrect's good or
I
I'm
would say it
that
might
good.
might be an autocorrect on it.
Who knows? I think the big thing that made us like realize, like I would fall asleep in classes quite a lot, and I'd have teachers like I had one teacher freshman year because I'd fall asleep in his class all the time. It's not my fault. He's boring, but but he would in the middle of like the entire class like stop and make everybody like yell at the same time to try to wake me up,
You never
or
told
like
me that.
everybody would like clap because there's a viral video of everybody clapping with somebody asleep in class and the person asleep started clapping.
Oh,
Yeah, and and so I just wake up and I think the dude's being rude. I never knew that I was asleep. I just woke up.
right.
So we go from being awake to waking up. But I would be taking tests, and this is whenever we were really starting to figure out that I had narcolepsy or something might be going on. Is I'd be taking tests in like the testing lab or wherever, like it's like the separate setting, and the ladies in there is very very nice. But I would be taking my tests, and she would wake me up like 30 45 minutes have gone by, and my response would always be I'm thinking, because in my mind I was thinking about my test and only 30 seconds had gone by in my brain.
Yeah.
So I went from thinking about an equation, and I didn't even close my eyes or anything. I just woke up 45 minutes later, and this lady is telling me that I've been asleep, and I'm telling her that she's wrong and that I wasn't asleep. I was thinking for 30 seconds, and I wasn't even aware that 45 minutes had gone by because I went straight from thinking about an equation to waking up. So it that's whenever we started having some questions about like what could this be and all.
When during
So
this time too, I was sitting with you at night helping you to stay awake with your homework, and I was
mhm.
getting upset with you too. It's like, just
Oh,
just
you
wake up.
you in eighth grade, whenever I had to do all the school at home,
Hmm.
you would lay into me some nights because I didn't even know I was falling asleep, and like I just couldn't stay awake for the life
Yeah.
of me.
So we're
So
not sure we're not sure when it really was starting with you. We're
I think
assuming it
eighth
was
grade.
definitely by eighth grade. I think even in seventh grade, when you had a lot of write-ups that year for non-compliance, and I think you were drifting during that time and not really focused and knowing what was going on. But it
Hmm.
was early still. So, but even, I mean, looking back, there were times when you were even late elementary that you would fall asleep and not know that you had
I
been
was a
asleep.
good sleeper.
So I think who knows when it was beginning, but it was becoming a more of an obvious issue, definitely by eighth and ninth grade.
Hmm.
So, well, why don't you? You've talked about the symptoms some. Why don't you give our listeners just a brief rundown of what's the process for testing to find out, like what type of doctor do you go to, and
Like
what
how do
type
you
of
find
testing do
out?
they do? Yeah.
So you go to a neurologist because I believe that they study brains. I don't know what neurologist stands for.
I think that's probably a
Um,
pretty good summary there.
Probably a pretty good summary. But you go there and they do this thing called a sleep study, and they do this for people with like sleep apnea or like anything that affects your sleeping. Or like you can also go to a neurologist for like different brain functions, like if you're having seizures and stuff like that. Like they can figure out like what's going on with your brain and your nervous system. Um, but you go there and they put these like probes on your head and all, and I had a lot of hair at that time, so that wasn't fun because I had goop in my hair like a week later still. um, but you put all these probes on you or whatever, and you do a sleep study. So you stay in this like makeshift hotel room that they have for however long, and at certain times they would tell you, like, I think 5 times throughout the day they were like, okay, you try to go to sleep. And needless to say, I passed with flying colors. I fell asleep 5 out of 5 times.
And this is after
And
sleeping 10 hours through the night before, because you went in at
yeah.
nighttime, slept all night, and then throughout the day you had the naps, right?
hmm So yeah, but they let you words. They pretty much would like tell you that like you're allowed to nap. Like they'd be on like the PA speaker. Like they dim the lights in your room, had the PA speaker, be like, okay, now try to go to sleep. And they let you sleep for 5 minutes. And my biggest complaint is, if I'm going to sleep, let me sleep. So, and they did that like 5 times. And what they're doing is they're seeing your brain patterns, because normal people, when they go to sleep, they go from being awake, functioning brain pattern, to there's different levels of sleep. So they'd go to level 1, and then level 1 goes to level 2, level 2 goes to level 3, and it's like a little staircase. Like it looks on the brain pattern things like a staircase. So you go up, and then you go over, and you go up, and you go over. You go level 1, 2, 3, 4, and then after 4 is REM sleep, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is like dreaming, the dream state of sleep.
It's the active sleep, I think.
Yeah, so it's active sleep, so you're dreaming. So as a narcoleptic, you don't go on a stair step. So all my brain patterns on all 5 of my naps and the night that they had me sleep there. So we go from being awake to REM. So we skip stage 1, 2, 3, and 4. We go straight from awake to deep, not the deepest level of sleep, but we go to deep, like dream state sleep. I think it's funny that when they showed me the chart, they're like, so this is how your brain should be. This is how it is. This is 100% narcolepsy. Like, this kid could fall asleep in the sun 10 times out of 10 is easy. Like, you can't really do testing on your kid till they have definite signs of it and they're maturing, because like narcolepsy for most people doesn't show up till after they're 15. So most people don't find out they're narcoleptic until 15 to 18. Some guys find out in their 20s. So if you think that they're just lazy and they're sleeping, it could be narcolepsy, but it could be them being a normal kid. So, but if they're after 15, 16 and they are falling asleep uncontrollably, and they're telling you that they're thinking when they've been asleep for 45 minutes, maybe that's a sign to go get a sleep study done. But
So I'm sorry I yelled at you so much in 8th grade during that
oh,
time.
your apology means nothing to me. There's still a grudge being held. No, like it's cool, because like as a kid, I'm just thinking like, oh, I probably should, because I didn't even know I had narcolepsy
No,
yet.
no, I mean
I'm
none of us
thinking,
knew what
I'm
was going
thinking,
on.
I'm thinking, I remember I was fighting to stay awake. Like I was
Yeah.
fighting to stay awake, and I just couldn't. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I need to stay awake so I don't get yelled at. But I didn't know at the time that that's physically impossible for me. So, and
So
as the viewers can tell, it didn't damage our bond.
no, no, well, I think we may be closer because we went through all that,
hmm
because you know we've done a lot of talking about it since then,
Hmm.
and understand each other a little bit better on it too.
Yes.
And I understand that level of drowsiness
Hmm.
just because I've had sleep issues myself,
Hmm.
but I'm not diagnosed with narcolepsy. But I can empathize with you, at least with understanding having no way of keeping my eyes open with at times.
Hmm.
Um, so just like we did with the dysgraphia and the ADHD, do you have any tips for parents or kids or teachers um, that are dealing with the early stages of narcolepsy? Because if they're still in school, it's still going to be pretty early for them.
Hmm. The best thing that you can do is, and obviously if you have been diagnosed, the doctor is going to tell you this, find a medication that works for you. Personally, I will kill somebody if I take Adderall. So I call it Matterall because that's really what it is. It just makes you an angry human being. It really turns you into a monster. But I personally, I take Sunosi. It's more of a newer brand. It's not an accelerant. It just makes your, to my understanding, it makes your dopamine and serotonin levels go up. So it keeps you awake and during the day. Personally, if I don't get good night's sleep, I'll still feel sleepy, but it helps me for like 4 to 6 hours to where I can't fall asleep. So if I need more energy, like on game days, I'll have some coffee. I love coffee, so I'll have coffee or a Red Bull or something to help me just be more awake. But other than that, try to get good nights of sleep because if you'll find a balance of too much and too little sleep. That somewhere in the middle, you'll feel like a very good functioning human being. And I'm very bad at finding that. But for me, it's somewhere between 7 and 8 hours, sometimes 9. Um, but I mean, you just got to find what works for you to be able to get your stuff done and wake up on time and go to sleep on time because it affects both falling asleep and waking up. So they make this thing called a sonic bomb, which is an alarm clock that like shakes your bed. Um, you can put that underneath your pillow. Um, you can get your mom to call you if you're at college because that's the only way I woke up last year. The entire year was I had my mother call me and she'd call me about 25 times before I'd wake up. Um, Now, what I do personally, because I will wake up to my alarm more, I set like 10 alarms that are all like the first one, if I'm waking up at 10:30, the first one's at 10:15, the second one's at 10:20, the third one's at 10:25, and then we have 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30. And I put it underneath my bed because I use a little wedge pillow. So I put it underneath my pillow right there. So it'll like vibrate my pillow a little bit and like it's already loud. It's in my ear basically. So I have it within like 2 feet of my head so I can hear it. And that works for me, but you got to find what works for you. And there are contraptions out there that that are some type of alarm clock that makes you wake up. I mean, you just got to find something that works for you to be functioning because nobody, like I've said, I have days like today. I got into my class at 9:30 online, and it's an online class, so I got into my class, and then I sat in my class for like 30 minutes, and then I woke up and it's 3:30 in the afternoon. Like you have bad days, but you just got to understand that if you miss a day, like tomorrow the sun's gonna come up again. You're gonna be able to figure it out. You're gonna have bad days, but you're gonna have more good days than bad days. And if you find a routine that works and you stick to that routine, you're gonna have more good days than bad days. So you're gonna figure it out. It's gonna be very, very tough, and I'm not gonna lie or sugarcoat it. It's gonna be very tough to be able to find a way to get up and just be functioning in the morning. Or it could be easy and your problem could be falling asleep more. But once you figure out what works, you'll be able to feel better about it because waking up at 6 in the afternoon like I was doing last year is miserable. Because especially in the winter, you feel like you just missed the entire day. And nobody wants to feel like they missed out on a day. So but parents out there, just, I mean, obviously the best thing you can do, no matter what the disability is make sure that your kid feels like they're okay. But try to help your kids wake up or find a system to get up, because the more I read on online forums, the more I find there are parents waking up their 30 and 40-year-old kids in the morning still. And you don't want to be that parent. You want them to find a way to be functioning on their own. So help them find that. And I think there's dogs that do it now, which is cool. But if you can just find a way to make that work, then you can help them find a way to be independent. And that's what honestly any parent wants, is for their kid to one day be able to function on their own and be independent. So I don't think that y'all can do much more other than be good parents and support them, and help teachers understand that your kid is not being lazy, your kid is not being disobedient. Your kid, honestly, half the time doesn't want to fall asleep. The other time, of course, I want to fall asleep. Everybody wants to fall asleep. I'm the only one that is doing it, though. And that's why I'm the oddball, or the one that's getting called out for it. But just help the teacher understand, really, that you're not trying to be lazy. I've had, I don't know how many meetings with my coach just talking about, in case I don't wake up in the morning, I'm not trying to be there. I want to be there more than anything. I just physically can't find a way to get there sometimes. So I had a buddy system for morning waits where I had somebody come wake me up, because we have 6:30 lifts, which means we got to be there. Excuse me. We got to be there 15 minutes early, because we start at 6:15. So we got to be 15 minutes early to 6:15. So we have 6:30 waits, but we got to be there at 6. So I'd have somebody come wake me up, and half the time that became a game for me of how can I make sure I'm awake before they get here. So you can kind of find your thing that works for you. But a lot of people are going to misunderstand that as being lazy or insubordinate. And you just got to have meetings and be like, look, like, I don't want to fall asleep. I want to be functioning. I want you to understand that there are going to be days that just isn't the way that it works. But if you can communicate effectively and help them understand, that there's going to be a lot less misunderstandings. So, at least personal experience. So I literally don't know how many times I've emailed teachers of, sorry, I had a bad narcolepsy day, and they're like, that's okay, here's what you missed. So there are good people out there, and they if they understand what you're dealing with, they will a lot of times be like, I understand, and I'm sorry that happened, but let's help you get back up to speed. So, and I have faith in humanity that even if you're in Nebraska, whoever lives in Nebraska and you're watching this, I'm sorry. I think you have a bunch of corn. I don't know what else. But if you're in Nebraska at a large school, and you have a teacher that you're missing their class, if you just talk to them half the time, they're going to be good people, and they're going to be like, I understand. Let's make a plan. Let's make it work out. So just have faith and stay in there.
So I think those are some good points there. Yeah. That's,
Let me breathe.
yeah.
I talked a lot, if you can't tell.
I was going to ask you about some of the resources that are available to you, but you've mentioned some already. You've mentioned the neurologist. For both, I'm thinking now both narcolepsy and ADHD and dysgraphia. And on an IEP, for parents listening, dysgraphia may not be listed as dysgraphia. It may be listed as a specific learning disability. That's the category that it falls under, at least in our state. And I don't know state to state if that differs or not. But I know for Christopher's IEP when he was in grade school, it was a specific learning disability and ADHD.
Yeah.
And but the resource teacher in your school would be an option then. And then once you got to college, you have disability services there that you work with.
Yeah,
and,
I meet with her. I meet with her at the beginning of each semester and at the end of each semester, right before exams. And she goes, hey, this is what we have as a plan already. Are these helping you? I say yes. And then she goes, okay, is there anything else you need? And then she asks you, are you doing all right? And she takes care of you. So I'm at a small school in southern North Carolina. So obviously that people care a little bit more than big cities and all that. but most places, disability services, they really are there to help you, and they're good people. But the people that are in that job field are because they want to help people. So 9 times out of 10, they are the nicest people on campus. So,
When I think even if you're in a larger school, you're going to have an office
oh
like
yeah,
that that's going to make it seem like a smaller community for you.
oh yeah,
You've talked about the teachers understanding. So your teachers are also resources for you as far as, especially with the narcolepsy. If you're missing a class, finding out what you missed, working with your accommodations, your coaches are a support for you. I'd like to think you would say your family's a support for you.
I feel like they're the biggest support.
And then there's
Um,
also web resources out there. You've even talked about some of the research that you've done, and just looking to see, what else is around there.
mm,
And so specifically with narcolepsy, because if you're a parent listening to this and you're suspecting narcolepsy, your child is probably already in high school. So you're going to want to get some resources pretty quickly, get the testing done, and get them ready before they get to college. I'm going to put a list of some of the different networks that are out there specifically for narcolepsy. And if you'll look at the show notes, you'll be able to find those and get connected that way. And Christopher, you haven't. I don't think you've connected with some of these. I'll get them to you as well, so that if you want
no.
to look in there, there's some really good stories that people are telling right now in one of the series on Instagram, and it's kind of fun because they just give little blurbs about who they are and what they've learned.
But there are people out there that have gone through the same thing that you have, and they've done it for years because they're in their 40s or something like that. Like I said earlier, they can tell you their experiences. They can help you figure it out. So I'm
Yeah,
still kind of new to all this in relative terms. I've
right.
only what like 2 3 years that this has really been a thing for me.
Yeah, it seems like it's been longer, doesn't it?
It feels like all my life,
Yeah.
but
Well, because it was
now
a gradual progression too
yeah,
with it.
yeah. So but just I know that this wasn't on the prompt, but just know that by the time you're 25, every I don't know this personally, but I've been told this. Everything kind of levels out because your brain's not eating itself anymore, and you at that point people say it kind of gets a little bit better. And by the time I'm 25, hopefully they have this new medicine where like the chemicals that your brain's not producing to keep you awake and all, you can supplement that. So if that works out, that's cool.
Yeah,
Like they
it's
got
in the
Chris,
trials now, from what we heard.
yeah, as a narcoleptic that has gone through quite a lot to get here, it's gonna be all right. So you're
Well,
gonna
and
live.
it's one of the reasons I wanted you to come on Water Prairie, because we need to get the voice out there. I mean, other kids
Mhm,
that are starting this and are frustrated right now, they need to see people like you to know that, I don't have to wait till I'm 25. You're you're
mhm.
you're you're 19 and you're starting to settle down and figure this out. So there's
I
hope
mean, I
coming
mean,
soon.
to put it in the most extreme terms, I'm a collegiate athlete. I'm playing at a very high level, not Division 1. I'm playing at Division 2. Not many people even go on from high school to play another in college. I made that jump, and I'm playing at a high level for it. As a narcoleptic, someone who can't get up for their 6 a.m.s last year, I get dean's list every semester. Like I've gone through all this, but now I've figured it out to where I can play the sport that I want, and I'm planning on figuring out how to make it to the next level and either play indie ball or get drafted or play overseas or whatever I have to do to keep playing ball at a professional level one day. I'm to toot my own horn, I'm a pretty smart cookie. So I'm figuring out how in the classroom I can succeed and how I can work around all this. And I'm 19. Like this could either get better, or it could get worse. But I keep a positive outlook on it, and I think that's the best way to approach it. Is I'm doing the impossible every day, and like it's weird to me because I'm just it's just my normal life. But when you look at it from a step back, like if I can do all this and I have narcolepsy and I have ADHD, I have dysgraphia, and a lot of normal people go like having one or two of those things, like that's the hardest thing to overcome. I'm just here to tell you that I have not only overcome them, but I am succeeding in everything I want to do. So I've always wanted to play ball, and I'm at a school that was on my top 5 list coming out of high school. So you can literally do whatever you want, and people always tell kids that, and I believe it. So just make it happen. Don't stress. Figure it out. You'll figure it out. You'll love yourself. So it's not going to prevent you from living a life that you want to live. So you can become a rocket scientist or a brain surgeon or a football player.
Which is harder to accommodate for, ADHD, narcolepsy, or dysgraphia?
Um, it's weird for me because like until I got diagnosed with narcolepsy, all my problems was all my problems were dysgraphia and ADHD, because everything in the classroom was one of those two. Everything outside of that was one of those two.
Mm-hmm.
And then whenever I got narcolepsy, everything that became bigger and more important, and that kind of pushed the other two of like cool, like I have that, but like that's not the real issue. I'd say that narcolepsy is more debilitating than ADHD and writing, just because being awake and present is a big part of the human experience. And it's very hard to be awake and present when you're neither awake or present.
Yeah.
Um, so, but I'd say that the hardest thing to accommodate in a classroom is probably ADHD, because you can't, if you naturally can't sit there and focus on something, or your brain's like, this is boring, I don't want to focus on it, it's hard to go from that to, okay, I'm going to fully focus on this. And even doing homework on my own, it is hard to just start doing homework because your brain wants to do anything else. So there's not really a way to accommodate it. There's a way to put you in lower distraction environments, but nobody ever takes nobody knows what a low distraction environment is. So they can, like, this semester I was taking I was taking classes in one of our buildings. So I was taking tests in like a closet that had like whale, like a gargoyle whale. Excuse me again. Oh my goodness. I had like it like whale bones and a gargoyle and like the anatomy of a cell. And I kid you not, I could space out and stare at that for 30 minutes if I wanted to. So like your brain finds a way to distract yourself, and that's why it's hard to accommodate to that, because you can't find a way to trick your brain into doing what you want sometimes. Like you just got to let it run its course, and then okay, let's get back to what we are doing, like that. So, but I mean,
So as far as the
writing,
school environment, yeah, I could see that
but
being more difficult.
I mean, writing in school and all. Like I'm in college now. I take my notes on either my laptop or one thing that I do is I have Google Docs on my phone, so because I can type on my phone faster than I can on my keyboard. So I can like take notes on words. I don't write much by hand unless I want to, and I don't want to. Um, so that's easy to do, and as long as I can find a way to wake up, then I'm good on that. But it's hard to get yourself to focus on things that you don't want to focus on. So.
Yeah. We've talked a little bit about the accommodations that you have in place in college, and we had mentioned too that you had an IEP when you were in school. Can you list some of the accommodations that you've used both when you were younger and now that have been effective for you, that you would recommend kids considering having on their IEP or their accommodations plan in college?
I'd say the biggest thing for people with dysgraphia, especially, is a copy of notes. So I have a copy of teacher's note. Now that in college, it says in little quotes when available, but in high school and middle school and all, the teacher would a lot of times, because I'm for young kids I'm old, but for anybody my age or older I'm young. Um, we had Elmo's projectors, so it's like this little like crane device like this, and then it had like a camera here that would face down. So they'd show everybody what we're doing on a piece of paper, and then they'd give me that paper at the end of class, and that works great for a copy of notes.
Right.
Um, but because I can't keep up with writing it on my own, I needed to make sure I'm not missing anything, or because sometimes I can't read what I've written, then I need a clear, legible note that has all my notes. So that's a big one. A low distracted environment is good, because I just can't take tests when other people are taking tests in the same room, because I'm thinking about how fast they're going, how slow I'm going, or I can just the noise of paper, anything can distract me. So that's pretty bad for me, at least. Extended time is a huge thing for anybody with ADHD, because we do zone out quite a lot. That gives you that time to be able to zone out and come back, instead of trying to fight it the whole time. So you can kind of just let it run its course and come back. And I think I have double time for a lot of things. It's like if you have an hour to take it, I have 2 hours, and I'll usually finish it in like an hour and a half. So, but just being able to have that extra time, so you're not cramming the entire thing, is very, very, very beneficial, because then you're not stressing about, am I going to be able to finish in time? Or you can take time to actually think about the questions and not trying to rush through it. And I don't really know what other accommodations I had when I was younger, but those are the ones I have right now.
You have being able to use a computer for writing on tests and exams.
I'm in college. That's what I'm saying. I can't remember, because that's just, everybody does that now. But when I was younger, I'd take quizzes and stuff on the computer. So like if it was open response, I just type my answers and stuff like that. So that's helpful, because I didn't like writing.
A couple other things that I remember, either you have now or you had, the opportunity to use technology,
It's
laptop
kind of the
or a
same
smart
thing.
pen.
That's
With
kind of the same thing.
yeah, the and the smart pen. I set this out just to remind me to make sure that we mention this one.
Casually, not sponsored, but
No, it isn't sponsored, but
it's not
I
sponsored.
was going to say this is yours because you're not using it this semester.
Mm-hmm.
But the smart pen that you have, I was going to do a tutorial on that, and we'll link that off of this too and put it on the YouTube video.
It's a pretty cool
But I
toy.
talked to LiveScribe a couple weeks ago, and they're coming out with a new version 2 of this now. That I'm curious to see what features it'll have. But
Mm-hmm.
but this one's still available in some places, but the new one's supposed to be out in the next week or two. So I'm looking forward to that, and I hadn't told you about that yet. And then the other thing that you have now that you didn't have because it didn't matter in grade school, and that's early registration in college.
Oh yeah, which I was denied last year, but we're finally getting it this year.
What took it because
Um,
you're in a smaller school, it took a little bit for them to figure out how to do that.
yeah. So the way a lot of colleges work is they have their seniors sign up for classes, and then a few days later they're juniors, and a few days later sophomore, and so on and so on. So because I need specific classes because I'm narcoleptic, I can't have classes that are like 8 in the morning. So I get my classes like after 9:30, and even 9:30 is a struggle. So after 10:30 oftentimes, because I know I can be there for those. But
Yeah, those are all
um,
the accommodations I could think of that you have currently on your list.
mhm,
We may have missed one, but at least give you a good idea if you're listening to this and wanting
yeah.
to kind of know where to start. And then you've mentioned some technology that you use, and I just kind of wanted to go
Mhm.
over that. With the alarm clock, you had mentioned the sonic bomb. And again, we can link that. You've tried that, and for you, you didn't really feel like that was the best one, but
No,
because you
it
found other
works for a
options.
lot of people though, and I know people that don't have narcolepsy that use it
Oh yeah.
just because it is good for waking you up.
Oh,
So it
trust
might
me,
it.
the entire family woke up when you were using it.
So whenever I would use it, my entire family would wake up, as my mother just said, but I would not.
Yeah.
So um, and so it didn't work for me. But they also make like little like robot ones that like whenever you if you just look up narcolepsy clocks, they have a ton of weird inventions. There's like robot ones where the alarm goes off and then it rolls away, so you got to go chase it.
So you have to get up and
Gotta
go
get
get
out
it.
of
Yeah.
bed. They make ones that pretty similar to that. It goes off and it like shoots. Like if you've ever seen one of those like Disney fairy things where you like pull the cord and they like spin up and then come down. It's like one
Yeah.
of those to where like it like shoots it out, and like that's the key to stop the alarm. So you got to go find it and then put it back for it to stop. I've seen a pretty creative one where the alarm goes off and they have like a laser pointer like gun model, and you have targets in the room that are Bluetooth, so until you hit the target it won't turn off, which I just think is a redneck's dream.
I
But
have an app on my phone that
yeah, do math.
well, no, not just the math. There's one where you have to actually get up and go scan a barcode. So you could put the
Yeah,
barcode for your medicine on
it
it.
makes you, yeah, it makes you get up and get moving, and like it makes you wake up your brain a little bit to just get out of bed, honestly, because you can wake up for an alarm to turn it off, and if you're still in bed you can fall right back asleep.
Yeah.
So which is another reason why I have so many alarms. So but
So you're talking about you use the iPhone for that and also for typing in class.
mhm,
We talked about the smart pen, and there's notebooks that go with that.
yeah,
You
that's
use a
cool.
laptop. Any other technology you can think of that you've used?
Not to like help me really, like, I mean, one tool that like the smart pen does already that friends of mine used in high school is they would either use I think it's called like memos or something on our voice recorder on the iPhone,
Mm-hmm.
or even just a video of the class. Like you can just do that so you can listen to the class later on, and pick up on anything that you missed, or like if you can't remember something that they said, now you have literally something that can tell you what they said.
Right.
You
But
can
that's
use
another
your phone
piece
to.
too. If you, whether it's dysgraphia or ADHD, even using
Mhm.
that iPhone or smartphone, as long as
Yeah,
you have permission to be able to take photos of the notes on the board.
I was gonna say you can also take photos of the board and notes and stuff like that. So that's another use for iPhones or just phones in general.
So there's a lot of tools that weren't there 10 years ago that are
Hmm.
available now. All right, so um, changing gears a little bit, I want to talk more about the athletics now. So what are your
Hmm.
goals for the future?
Christopher's story isn't over yet. In episode 8, we'll post the rest of his story about playing baseball in college and how he went through a difficult injury that almost put an end to his dreams of playing baseball. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it.
Tune in next Friday to hear Frankie's story and how he created the Dancing Eyes podcast as a way to connect with people all around the world who have congenital nystagmus. Connect with us by leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing this episode, or looking at the episode resources in the description or at waterprairie.com.